Welcome to Halal Money Matters, presented by Citrina Capital. I'm Christopher Patton.
I'm Moneem Salam.
Ramadan Mubarak, Moneem.
Ramadan Kareem. It's a really exciting month for us to be in.
Well, we wanted to talk about a very specific financial part of the Ramadan experience for this episode.
We did. There is an obligation for Muslims to pay what is called Zakat al-Fitr at the end of the month of Ramadan. And so it's not a topic that a lot of people get educated on, why it's there, what the obligations are, those type of things. So we have a special guest today to help us kind of navigate through that.
Our guest today is Mustafa Umar. He's got a degree in theology and Islamic law, master's in Islamic studies, and currently the president of the California Islamic University.
Let's get started. So, we really wanted to do a show on Zakat al-Fitr. It is, an obligation coming at the end of the Ramadan. So can you just give us a little bit of a background about Zakat al-Fitr and kind of the origins of it and those type of things?
Sure. Yeah. So Zakat al-Fitr, sometimes it's just called like Fitra, or it's called Sadaqat al-Fitr. It's basically this charity that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he mandated that all Muslims who can afford this, they need to give it before the day of Eid or on the morning of the Eid celebration. And really what Fitr means, the word Fitr itself, it means like breaking of the fast. So when you break your fast, it's called Iftar. And Fitr means like Eid, the day of Eid is called Eid al-Fitr because you're not going to be fasting that day anymore after fasting for an entire month. So this Zakat al-Fitr, it's directly connected with the fasting being completed and the fasting is over. So when the fasting is over, what happens is you have this day of celebration called Eid. And the day of Eid, people are supposed to celebrate. Like it's a day to have fun. It's a day to enjoy. It's a day where people are supposed to wear their finest clothes. They're supposed to go and enjoy and have like good food. So it's a day, it's a festival. It's a day of festivity and celebration. But what happens is there's a lot of people who are poor and they can't even get enough wealth that they need to celebrate the day, let alone, we're not talking about other levels of poverty or, what they're struggling with. On the day of Eid, they would have to either work or they would have to try and find some provision, for their food or something like that. So what Zakat al-Fitr really is, it gives people who didn't have the opportunity to celebrate and party on the day of Eid, it gives them enough money so that they can actually go and have that party day and that festival day, and they don't have to worry about what they need particularly for that specific day of Eid. That's really what it's about.
So it's both very specific and time sensitive then.
Yes, it is. It is specific. It has a specific purpose. The people, if you just give general charity, right? General charity is just people will need, money for paying their bills. They may need money for just buying food. This is specific to helping people celebrate on the day of Eid. Now, it could be a little bit more. It could probably last them a few extra days or something afterwards, but it's really about giving them this opportunity to enjoy Eid like everyone else. And like you said, it's time specific. It is supposed to be reaching them on the day of Eid so that they can benefit on the day of Eid.
We talked about the Fitr. What about the Zakat? Why is it called Zakat al-Fitr?
Yeah. So the reason why it's called Zakat is like a charity tax that people who have wealth, they have to pay. They're obligated to pay. And what this does is basically redistributes wealth from those who have to the people who don't have. Right. So this is a very important, wealth redistribution mechanism that exists. And there's two types of zakah. Zakah, the normal zakah is where you pay once a year to approximately, 2.5% on your wealth you're giving to people who are in needy categories. Here, this is specifically tied to the day of Eid. So it's called zakah because it's an obligation. It's called zakah because it's somewhat similar to the other zakah where you have to meet a certain threshold to have to pay this. Otherwise, you're going to be receiving this instead. One hadith, it talks about, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said that whoever has, I'm summarizing this, so that whoever has this amount of wealth, they're supposed to be giving a sa', which is kind of like a measure. It's like 4 double handfuls of, food stuff, like of dates or barley or raisins or something like that to people who need it. So that's one hadith. Then there's another hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he said that when you give this charity, it basically compensates for all your deficiencies that you had when you were fasting in Ramadan. So if you were slandering, you were gossiping, you were doing stuff that you shouldn't have done, this actually helps compensate for the mistakes that you made while you were fasting. So from the giver's perspective, not only are they helping somebody who's in need to be able to celebrate the day of Eid, but they're actually compensating and making up for their own mistakes or slips that they had in the month of Ramadan.
Yeah, so if you take zakat from a perspective of purification, then you're purifying your Ramadan.
Yes.
For any mistakes that you could have done. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
How do you calculate it, and where does the dollar amount come from? There's some people who say it's $7 in the US, other people say it's $10.
It's about 5 to 7 pounds of some staple food. So if you go to the market now, food prices fluctuate all the time. Dates, sometimes you could get 5 pounds of dates for like $20. You could get, if you do raisins, you're going to get like maybe, $10, $15. Maybe it'll go up to $30. If you do barley, you're going to get a different amount. So the reality is that it's really was a quantity of food. And now when we try to figure out, okay, well, what's the amount today? It's going to vary depending on which country, which market, is this food, in high demand or not. So that's why really the range is usually somewhere between about $10 to $30. That someone's going to pay.
It's interesting because we just did our last episode was all about inflation, and right now inflation is really high. I mean, it's running around 7% or so. But I'll be honest with you, Amar, I've been paying $10 for the past 30 years.
Yeah, so I mean, what happened was, so the Fiqh Council of North America, they actually recalculated and they adjusted for inflation this year. And Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui, who's the chairman, and the other Fiqh Council agreed as well. They said we're going to put it at $12 this year because the food prices have been going up. So they put it up higher. Personally, I think it should probably be even a little bit higher than that. I personally usually give $20 or $30 because it just, you could always pick like the cheapest food. You could be like, oh, well, raisins are a little bit cheaper right now than dates, so I'm just going to pick the cheapest food. It's really not that much money. Most of us are kind of middle class. So I would recommend for the middle class person, if they can, to do just do a little bit more. But really the $12 or the previous years, the $10 that's there, that was really just an average estimate. In some places it goes down range between like $5 and like $25. So they just came up with a balanced estimate along those lines. And there's a lot of difference of opinion. There's some subjectivity involved there, really. So the goal is to be able to give something that would suffice a person so that they could have some benefit on the day of Eid.
Say, Chris, we have breaking information here because I was just at the mosque last night and they still had $10 as the Zakat al-Fitr. But now we're hearing, and we're going to break this on the story on Halal Money Matters. It's going to be $12 rather than $10.
Yeah. So we actually just made this decision. It was just like 2 weeks ago. I have the text message right here. I'll tell you exactly what it is. The Fiqh Council of North America has confirmed the amounts for this year. Fidya is for basically people who are not able to fast. They're going to feed someone else. So fidya is $15. And Zakat al-Fitr is $12. So that's what was decided by the Fiqh Council.
So $12, is that per person, per household? Who pays? How does that break out?
So yeah, so for the Zakat al-Fitr, yes, it's per person. So $12 per person. And what's supposed to happen is the head of the household is supposed to pay for their children. So, myself, I have to pay for both of my children. I'm not obligated to pay for my wife, but if I do, it's just nice of me. I encourage women to pay on their own, only for one reason only, is because I think in the Muslim community, in some segments, there's this kind of like financial illiteracy that exists among many women. Kind of like, it's like a cultural thing. The husband generally takes care of everything. Part of giving the zakah on their own and giving their zakat al-fitr as well, it just gives them a sense of agency. Like, hey, I'm doing this myself. So I highly encourage that.
So just to be clear, then, even like, for example, if you have an infant child, you still would pay on behalf of that child as well. So,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, on infant children as well. And the interesting thing I find very interesting in the books of Islamic law, they say you're not obligated to pay on behalf of your adult children. And I think that's also very important for our day and age, because what generally happens is that there's a lot of people, they've reached the age of maturity, 16, 18, sometimes, 30. They're very financially immature So I think it's very important for kids, even if they don't have a job, hopefully they do have some job, that they learn to kind of pay their own zakat, their normal zakat, as well as their zakat al-fitr, because it gives them the sense of like, hey, you know what? It's my responsibility because I now have money, whether I'm an earner or I have some savings somehow. It's my responsibility to realize that this is a debt on me. Basically, I have an obligation to pay this zakat. So I mean, I highly encourage, parents to not just handle this for the kids, because I know a lot of parents, they just do it, and then all of a sudden, like the kid, turns 30 and he's like, I've never paid zakat in my life. I don't know what to do. For me, this is like a very important like life lesson and principle that should be imparted to every single Muslim young person as well.
So yeah, so let's get into a little bit more about the actual whether you're paying foodstuff or monies and that type of thing. So I know in the past they used to probably did pay with foodstuffs, but now giving somebody $10 worth of raisins, they're like, thank you, but what do I do with it?
Exactly. So what's really interesting is, there's 4 popular schools of Islamic law throughout the Muslim world. There's the Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali. And what's interesting is 3 out of 4 of these schools, they said that you have to give food. You're not able to give money. You cannot give currency to the poor. You actually have to give food. And it was only the Hanafi school that says, no, you can give whatever's more beneficial to the poor. And in fact, they said it's oftentimes better to give money, because what are the poor going to do with 20 pounds of barley? Like imagine someone's walking like to the mosque on Eid day, and they walk by and they're like, someone's like, oh, 5 pounds of barley. Oh, look, you seem like, you're in need. Here's 5 pounds of barley. And all of a sudden you got like 100 pounds of barley, like stacked up around this person. How is that helping them enjoy the day of Eid? So
traditionally really, you're saying that 3 out of the 4 schools said you have to give it in foodstuff, but now is there still that opinion amongst those schools, or have they changed?
Yeah, so what's happened in the majority of scholars in the world today, they're like, that's just not practical at all. I mean, we have to go with the Hanafi school in this regard. This makes a lot more sense. Pretty much most people have changed their opinion, and they're like, well, we can't actually apply the hypothetical ruling that we had in the past, because it's just not practical at all. And it kind of gives you a greater sense into the way that poverty, functions today. It's not everyone needs food to celebrate the day of Eid. I mean, if the purpose is to celebrate the day of Eid, sometimes it's clothing that they need. Sometimes it's, a transportation. So I think it's an interesting discussion, especially among scholars that are like, when they look back at this issue, they're like, what could it have been like when people were just limited or restricted to just giving food? It's a different conception of the needs and how our societies evolved. So I find it fascinating.
So let's talk a little bit about maybe the benefits for the giver and the receiver. We talked a little bit about it as far as the word zakat, meaning to purify, and thinking about it from an economic perspective. What does it do for both the giver and the receiver?
Yeah, I mean, from economic perspective, it really for the giver, it makes them part of a system that is transferring wealth to people who are in need, and that's important, because you have to be appreciative. If you are in a capacity and ability where you can have fun and enjoy the day of Eid, right? People go out to restaurants, they buy fancy clothes, they usually buy brand new clothes. Some people even like they rent cars. Like I know in the UK, a lot of my friends, they tell me they'll rent like a Ferrari or Lamborghini for like half a day or something like that on the day of Eid, just to like, that's their way of celebrating, especially younger people. So when they're able to celebrate in all these various ways, I think what it really does is it makes them understand that, hey, our wealth, the fact that we have this money, 1, we have a responsibility towards them, and 2, we have to acknowledge that we're privileged. So I think this concept of remembering that you have a responsibility over your wealth, number 1, and number 2, actually like taking the time out to calculate a certain amount and say, I'm going to be giving to someone who's not able to benefit not able to enjoy the day of Eid the way that I'm enjoying on a massive level. It's a great life reminder that I think all of us need. So that's from the perspective of the giver. From the perspective of the receiver, I think what it also does, it not only does it help them to enjoy the day, but what happens in society, and you look at this on a macro level, when you study history, a lot of history gets interpreted, especially from like a Marxist lens or a socialist lens. You see a lot of revolutions, a lot of wars and stuff, they're kind of class wars. And, when people are very wealthy and they have a lot of money, the poor can become envious of them. And one of the benefits is it helps remove that envy. And I think that helps them because they're like, hey, look, all this influx of money is coming in. It's coming from my brothers and sisters in Islam who recognize their responsibility, for supporting the other people who are either going through some temporary difficulty or who just have not had the ability to, be able to celebrate the day of Eid or have that amount of wealth that other people have.
Zakat al-Fitr is very specific. It's for that day. It's basically telling people, come and enjoy this with us.
Exactly.
Given how specific it is, how is the giving generally done? Is it on an individual basis? Is it through a mosque? Are there organizations that field the donations so that they're used specifically for that purpose? Or what does that look like?
Yes. So there's three ways. There's one is, if you live in an area, especially like in Muslim majority countries, what a lot of people will do is, they'll just be walking by, a day or two before Eid, or maybe even on the day of Eid when they're walking to the masjid, mosque for the prayer, they'll find someone who seems like they're in need or they're asking, and they'll go ahead and they'll give them that money right there on the spot. So that's one way. And I think in, metropolitan cities in America, that's a much more rare, because you don't just walk down the street and just find some person, let alone a Muslim, just like there and just be like, hey, I'm somebody who's in need. So the second way of giving is basically giving it to a charitable organization that's going to distribute on your behalf. They have a registry of people who usually come for them throughout the year for like normal zakah services and normal zakah distribution. And they reach out to those people and they give them like a gift card, or they give them, they do like a toy drive for the kids by, buying certain things or whatever it may be. So that's a second way of doing it. And the third way is to give it to your local mosque. And your local mosque will either do the exact same thing that this charitable organization does, or they will actually just pass it off to a charitable organization without taking any overhead or anything like that. So it'll eventually get to the people, that need it.
In America, I was very used to just basically just dropping it into a box or charging it on my credit card. And when I was living in Malaysia, they have a very, very beautiful custom. So what they do is, and towards the last 10 days of Ramadan, they'll have a table set up and there'll be a person behind that table. And so you walk up, you sit down and say, I want to give my Zakat al-Fitr. He'll basically take the money from you, give you a receipt, and then he'll sit there and make a dua for you. He'll make a prayer for you. I just found that to be so beautiful. It's like, it's
awesome.
a whole experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that brings me to your other question is that, is there a preferred way to do it? And I think, the preferred way, just on a psychological level, is that if you do it in a way where you can connect to this act of worship on a deeper level, it's more valuable. So one way would be like, like you said, like this Malaysian system where you sit down and person's making, a prayer for you and you're getting a receipt and you're doing it in a more formal manner than simply just walking by a box and throwing it in and passing by. That's definitely more preferred. And I think the most preferred way would actually be to try to seek out someone who's actually in need and who's qualified to receive this. And then you go and you give this to them and you present it to them. I think a lot of Muslims in America, a lot of people in America, they think like there's no poverty, here at all. And that's a misconception. So seeking someone out, this person is definitely in need. When you see something, seeing is believing, right? It's like when you see a person who's in need and you can kind of see their situation, it really hits home a lot more. So it's not an easy thing to do, but I think from a psychological perspective, that is the preferred way to do it, because that's actually the way that the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to do that. And it kind of gives you more of a connection with the people and a connection just with the reality of your circumstances. Sometimes we live in these concrete jungles and we don't realize what exists outside of our own little, bourgeois bubble or something like that.
The person that's receiving the Zakat al-Fitr, do they are they only people that are eligible for Zakat al-Mal? Or can you give us an example of somebody who's not eligible for, let's say, Zakat on your wealth, but still would be eligible for Zakat al-Fitr?
Yes, I mean, there's actually a pretty big difference of opinion among scholars. But I'll tell you, there are, according to even the lowest opinion, yes, there are people who either are going to qualify for zakah or there are people who are one notch above, which means, for example, there's two ways to calculate it. Let's say someone qualifies for zakah normally, and this is according to the Hanafi school, which is a very prominent school of thought. So somebody would normally qualify for zakah and they would be able to receive zakah. When it comes to zakat al-fitr, there's an interesting threshold that they have. They say you remove the surplus wealth that they have when you're determining whether they're zakah eligible or not. When you're calculating zakah, you exclude all personal items, right? So if you have 3 TVs, 3 sofas, and 3 computers, right? None of that qualifies for your eligibility of whether you need to pay zakat or not, right? You have not met the threshold where you need to pay zakat yet. You look at how much money you have, 3 ounces of gold, like $6,000 approximately. But when it comes to zakat al-fitr, it's very interesting. Is the Hanafi rule, which is an Islamic law rule, is that you exclude things which are not needed under the personal item category. So what you do is you go, oh, well, you know what? You do need a sofa in your house, but you don't need 3 sofas. So we're going to count the other 2 sofas as having a value, and that's going to put you in the category for this, whether or not you're going to be receiving. You can't even argue that you need a TV. So all 3 TVs would be included, whatever the market value happens to be. So you're going to calculate those personal items which are actually not in the category of need when it comes to zakat al-fitr. When it comes to normal zakah, everything, you can have jet skis in your garage, you can have a speedboat, and none of that counts as you becoming zakah eligible, that you need to pay zakah for that. But when it comes to zakat al-fitr, all of that is considered. So we do look at the personal things that you have which are superfluous and you don't really need them. You're going to consider that as part of your wealth when you become obligated to be paying the zakat al-fitr.
What's the consequence of not paying it?
So the consequence of not paying it is pretty severe. So when something is mandated in Islam, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, obligated this, it is considered to be a major sin, because zakah is a pillar of Islam in general, right? And since zakat al-fitr kind of falls under the category of zakah, you're basically violating one of the pillars of Islam. A pillar is like a column which holds up the structure of your religion. If you're violating one of them, you're breaking one of them, what's happened means that your foundation for your entire religion starts to become shaky. So that's one, very severe warning against, not paying zakat al-fitr. This is something you don't take lightly. The sin of neglecting zakah is something that no Muslim should even consider, because from our perspective in our religion, we are going to be held accountable if we don't fulfill this important pillar of Islam.
Is there something about your Ramadan not being accepted if you don't pay prior to the Eid prayer?
I don't recall the detailed hadith on that, but I know that basically it's as if your fasting is not complete until you've paid the zakah. Yeah.
Okay.
Moneem and I have talked in other episodes about, now this might not be appropriate when you're giving to someone directly or even to a mosque, but we've talked about donating something like a stock or a security to a charitable organization. Now, if the organization could handle that, would that be appropriate in this case, or is that getting away from the intent?
I don't think it's getting away from the intent. It's probably, I'll give you an example. I'm on the board of Uplift Charity. It's a well-known charitable organization here in Southern California. And what they do is they know that a lot of Muslims, they give their zakat al-fitr like kind of near the end of the time, like right before Eid, and then they don't have enough time to distribute it to all the people who are in need so that it reaches them for Eid. So what they do, I say, so what's your policy? So they say, our policy is we estimate approximately how much we're going to be distributing anyways to these people, and based on previous years, and we earmark that amount that we have from general donations and we distribute it. And then when people give us all this other one, we the actual zakat al-fitr, we offset what we had distributed, and we usually come out pretty close. So if that's the way that charitable distribution is functioning, especially in the United States of America here, if we talk about transferring of stocks and we're trying to get some kind of tax advantage or something like that, then I don't see why this would be a problem at all, especially when this is the way things are functioning. As long as the money is getting to the same person, and that, they're, Muslims are supposed to be intelligent, and hopefully they usually are, right? And you're supposed to take advantage of any tax breaks. Anyone who's intelligent knows that, hey, you get a good accountant and you try to get as many tax advantages as you possibly can. So Muslim charitable organizations should definitely utilize the same thing. I don't see why they shouldn't. I don't think it takes away from the purpose, especially when we look at the distribution mechanism and the way that, kind of transfers. Many people cannot find their own people to give directly, by themselves. So I see no problem with that. And it's probably a smart move to do.
But one also thing to keep in mind is that Zakat al-Fitr is such a small amount. Like, for example, in my family, it would only come out to about $40, $50. That probably giving that amount to a charity, the transaction cost for that charity to sell it and do all that kind of stuff is probably going to be more than the actual service. So yes, you can do it, but maybe economically speaking, it might not be the best thing to do. Maybe, Chris, for you, I think you have 20 kids. Maybe beneficial for you.
At least 30. Who knows?
At least 30.
Yeah. But when it comes to the zakah, just in general, yeah, that would be definitely a great option. I think that there's a lot of people who don't understand what zakat al-fitr is, and it's very important that everyone in the Muslim community be educated. I see in so many, masjids, they just make an announcement. They're like, oh, zakat al-fitr this year is like $12 or $15 or whatever it is. And I noticed that like anyone who's over 40, they understand, right? And then anyone who's like under 20, they just ignore the announcement because they don't even understand what it is. I think this basic core education about something as important as zakat al-fitr, it should not be undermined. We should explain what zakat al-fitr is so that when people are giving it, they actually feel and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't neglect this important part of our religion.
Please consider an investment's objectives, risks, charges, and expenses carefully before investing. To obtain this and other important information about the Amana Funds in a current prospectus or summary prospectus, please visit amanafunds.com or call toll-free 1-800-728-8762. Please read the prospectus or summary prospectus carefully before investing. The Amana Funds are distributed by Saturna Brokerage Services, member FINRA and SIPC, and a wholly owned subsidiary of Saturna Capital, the investment advisor to the Amana Funds. Investing involves risk, including the risk that you could lose money. The Amana Funds restrict investments to those companies consistent with Islamic and sustainable principles, which limits opportunities and may affect performance. This material is for general information only and is not a research report or commentary on any investment products offered by Saturna Capital. This material should not be construed as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy any security in any jurisdiction where such an offer or solicitation would be illegal. We do not provide tax, accounting, or legal advice to our clients, and all investors are advised to consult with their tax, accounting, or legal advisors regarding any potential investment. Investors should not assume that investments in the securities and/or sectors described were or will be profitable. This podcast is prepared based on information Saturna Capital deems reliable. However, Saturna Capital does not warrant the accuracy or completeness of the information. Investors should consult with a financial advisor prior to making an investment decision. The views and information discussed in this commentary are at a specific point in time, are subject to change, and may not reflect the views of the firm as a whole. All material presented in this publication, unless specifically indicated otherwise, is under copyright to Saturna. No part of this publication may be altered in any way, copied, or distributed without the prior express written permission of Saturna Capital.